Welcome to the Essentially You podcast, Dr. Stephanie Estima. How are you doing today, girl?
So good. And I'm so happy to be here with you again. It's been wonderful. We've been spending a little bit of time together in the past couple of weeks and just thrilled every time I get to spend some time with you.
I am so thrilled to get to spend time with you. I mean, we get to be the geeky goddesses and just
Yes.
kind of get into it, really helping to support women in their 40s and their 50s navigate the terrain of shifting hormones and everything that is going on. All the big work that the women are doing in the world, making sure that they're doing well. And your book is out.
Yes.
Congratulations. I am so proud of you. I'm so excited for you. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. But specifically, we're talking about metabolic flexibility, we're talking about intuitive eating, and we're talking about how to eat for our cycle, because many of us, although our cycles are getting a little wonky, we still have one.
That's right. Yes, we do still have one, and we have one until we don't anymore. So, thinking about how we can be honoring our biology as it changes is what is going to help stabilize moods. It's going to help with energy and brain fog, and it's going to help with body composition, how you look and how you feel. So, yeah, even though there are changes that happen in perimenopause, which we can talk about today, it's also really important for us to honor that change and to be able to flex, to adapt to some of those changes through our nutrition, through our training regimens, and how we treat ourselves.
Well, I just want to say, like, real talk. I don't know how well some of us do around honoring those changes. I think
Yeah.
that there's a little bit of grieving that we're moving into this new phase, and the way that culture has painted it, the way that the medical industry has painted it, it feels like we aren't moving into this incredible next new journey, that we're
Right.
losing something on the back end. So talk to me about how we can, and I think a lot of what you're offering in this book will allow us to really honor and to nurture where we're at. But how can we begin to reframe all of this, especially as things begin to feel like they are out of our control?
That's such a good question. And I think that you're absolutely right. When we look at celebrities, when we look at you never get like the hot 55-year-old, you always have like that woman's always wearing like a cardigan, and like there's nothing wrong with a cardigan, but like, she has no sexuality to her.
She's
And
not J-Lo at the Super Bowl.
she's not JLo at the Super Bowl. And actually, mentioning JLo and Shakira, those were actually pivotal moments for me. One, my background being Portuguese and Lebanese. So Shakira is Colombian and Lebanese, and JLo is she was the first woman who I was like, wow, someone actually looks like me. Like she's got the butt that I do. She's got the curves that I do on, kind of on when she first came on to In Living Color or whatever it was as a fly girl. But she, for me, really has redefined what it's like to move into menopause. Because at the time when she did it, she was around 50 years old, maybe 49 or 50 years old.
She was 50, girl.
She was 50. Okay.
Hmm.
So that, I mean, in and of itself, the amount of flexibility and cardiovascular endurance and explosive power that that woman's body has is incredible. But I also don't think that that's just for JLo. Like, yes, she has, helpers and all that, but we can also harness some of the energy that we are now, especially into menopause. There's a chapter in the book that I titled it, I'm Still Hot. It just comes in flashes now. And it's sort of done in like a little tongue in cheek, but we are still absolutely very sexy and continue to have sensuality and sexiness well into our, whatever age you want. I don't want to put any sort of number on it. It's really how you feel. And I think that we can do that by understanding and honoring our natural cycles as a woman. And if you think about menopause, one of the, I've grown up in the like and we've all been marinating in this like youth is the thing, right? You have to look a certain way and fit into a certain archetype. But if you think about the energy that you put into every month to create this endometrial lining, once you move into menopause, you can now use that energy for other things. Like you can now harness that creative energy, because that's what it is. You are creating a new organ essentially every single month in your reproductive years. As you move into menopause, that creative energy can now be harnessed to do some of the things that you are really interested in. It might be taking a class. It might be doing pole dancing like JLo's, it could be anything that your heart desires. So it's something where I've really reframed the journey for myself and for, the Betties that listen to me and that are going to buy the book, that it is an exciting transition, because most of us, like, I've had 2 kids, I'm kind of done. Like, I'm not having any more, but I'm still going to have my period until I don't, right? So I'm still going to
Right.
be,
Whether you're trying to get pregnant again or not, which you're not,
right. Which I'm not. I'm not
that's
trying to get
happening.
pregnant.
The
Yeah.
biology is going to continue.
That's right. The shop is closed for the baby making, but it's still going to happen no matter what. So when I move into my 50s and menopause, and I'm menopausal, I'm excited for that now, because I know some of the ways that we can change the metabolic hormonal landscape for us to really be able to optimize and profit off of that.
I love that. I love the awareness around shifting our consciousness, shifting our mindset. I was watching a show with Alex a couple days ago, and there was this woman on a Good Housekeeping magazine.
Mm.
And my immediate thought was like, oh, she's in her 40s. And then I like snapped back and I was like, I'm in my 40s.
Yeah.
Like, there's this stigma, like when we were in our teens or our 20s, that women in their 40s they
Yeah.
looked a certain way. She had her little sweater on and everything. And it was kind of the look
It's
that
like a
Good
scary
Housekeeping
age. There was like a
wanted.
scary age. Like once you got to like
Yeah,
42, it's like, oh my God, that's like you're old. You're
it's
a
over.
senior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? And I looked at my husband and I looked at my son and I was like, how is that coming out of my mouth? And I had to have a little check yourself before you wreck yourself moment, because it's this ingrained,
Mm.
cultural norms that we've unfortunately kind of been bombarded with or been brainwashed to believe
Without our consent. They're
with
in our brains
no
without our
consent.
consent. Yeah. Yeah.
And it was that moment where I was like, wait, like I know I don't look like that. Like redefining what that is. And I know that so many of us are redefining that today. Like what 40 years old was to my grandma, and maybe even to, although my mama, I'll tell you what,
Your
she just
mama, she is beautiful. Your mother is
She's
gorgeous.
beautiful. She's
Yes.
gorgeous. She's sexy. She
Mhm.
just turned 60 many weeks ago from when this was recorded. And the couple weeks before that, she had some 40-year-old men hitting on her. And this
Mhm.
happens all the time, girl, all the time. This is not new. And she just loves it. And she's got this gorgeous hair down to here. She's owned her power. She's owned her things since I've grown up, since I've known her.
Mhm.
And, at 50 years old, she's always reclaimed her life for herself. And
Mhm.
I'm so grateful to have my mom as someone to look up to. Like, and we always joke with Alex, like how lucky he is because of the genetics.
It's like, if you want to know what she's going to look like, look to mom.
That's
She's the hot,
right.
sexy
Lucky
mama.
you.
Yeah. But sexiness is an inside job
It's
too,
true.
right? Like your mom like exudes sensuality and sexiness, but not in like a overt, I'm looking for attention way, like in a rooted, grounded, like I know who
I
I am
know.
kind of way.
Hmm.
Yeah. And that's what that's where sexiness, I think, comes from. It's the confidence and the self-love and the belief that you can actually make a change if you want to. And that's part of the reason why I wrote the book was I wrote it partly for myself. We always, we get into the work that we do for our own healing in some ways. My period used to be like, God, it was like a gong show. Like, I think I've told you this before, but my period used to be like my arch nemesis. It was like every month I would try to force my way into eating a certain way, moving a certain way, no matter where I was in my menstrual cycle. And then, of course, I would have like punishing cardio, restricting the calories and all these things. And of course, my body would fight back like, no, you're a woman, you're built that you need, more calories at certain times of the month and more protein at certain times of the month. And I think, when you try to force the play, right? When you try to force, yourself into like, fitting the square peg into the round hole, as a lot of women often do with their diet and their training, then you end up, crashing and burning. I'd be like in the corner in the fetal position, cleaning out the pantry, like the chips and the cookies and the crackers were all cleaned out, right? And it's like, what's wrong with me? Well, what was wrong with me was that I was a woman and I wasn't listening to my own body signals. So I just wanted to add that in, because I think when you accept yourself for who you are, and who we are as women are not small men, we can't eat the same way all month long, we can't train the same way all month long, then you get to be sexier, because you have a much more intimate connection with yourself and an intimate knowing.
It's so true. When you think about that confidence that you speak into, and I think that's the one thing that Lo has always attributed to her sexiness, is that she wears that confidence. Like that's what you
Mm.
see first.
Right.
And when we really honor our bodies and we work with what we're given, that we really can create that.
Yes.
So let's talk, we're navigating, things are shifting. One of the biggest things that start to shift for us, probably because it just wasn't on our radar originally, and that is body composition.
Mhm.
Things are shifting. This is probably in all the surveys we've ran, which is well into the 15,000s of women 40 plus. When we ask what's one of the most disruptive concerns, it's that they don't know what's going on with body composition. And like you said, trying to be that square peg, shoving yourself with shame and guilt into the round hole, trying to like fit into this, starve yourself, whatever you've got to do, over exercise, and your body is just not responding. And a lot of women just feel like the scale is continuing to move up. They're putting on weight in areas they hadn't done before, and they don't know what to do. They don't feel like they have a viable solution. And we know that there is.
Always. Yes.
Always.
Yeah. So in the book, we sort of map out, I was saying to you this in the pre-chat, the book, the way I've designed the book is sort of like a choose your own adventure, but there's definitely like a starting point. Like we all have to master certain foundational basics. And then there's sort of, we talk about a lot of different hormonal presentations and some of the solutions for them. So where we always want to be starting off with is thinking about stress and inflammation. So the first thing, one of the first chapters in the book is we talk about the effect of being in sympathetics and our stress response. So I know that you've talked about this on the podcast before. I listened to your podcast, so I know that you've had guests on who've talked about being in this fight or flight response, being in this sympathetic tone or this sympathetic dominance. And when you are constantly there and you don't come back to that parasympathetic or vagal tone, you're not able to repair, you're not able to sleep, you're not able, it's called the rest and digest nervous system, like that's sort of the nickname for it, because those are some of the really important things that happen when you're in your parasympathetics. You're able to absorb your nutrients from your food. You're able to sleep, and you're able to initiate and maintain sleep, and you're able to do all the things that happen, the metabolic and brain benefits that happen when you're sleeping. So if you're always stressed, and when we say stressed, oftentimes women will think, well, I'm busy, but I'm not stressed, right? Or, when I think of someone who's stressed, it's like someone who's red in the face, pulling out their hair, screaming at the top of their lungs. That's not necessarily true for women. So we often talk about, and I talk about this in the book as well, we talk about the fight or flight response that we often attribute to the stress, to being in our sympathetics. But women also have another type of stress response. It's called the tend and befriend. So I would find this often in my right before exams. I was in chiropractic school. It was like, it's big exam week. There's like 10 exams in like 7 days. And I would be like, you know what I need to do right now? I need to clean my makeup brushes. Or you know what I need to do right now? I need to reorganize my sock drawer. And it's like, I have like physiology, anatomy, biochemistry, all these like big exams. And I'm like, what's more important than this right now? I need to fix my bed, So if you are a woman, and we label this as procrastination, the sort of the patriarchal, world order will call it, well, this is like procrastination. No, it's actually it's a response that women have, because when we tend to our environment or we tend to our children, it helps us feel a sense of calm. Or when we want to speak to our friends, or I'd want to, for me, when I was right around exam time, I'd be like, you know what, I just need to have like a chat with my girlfriend, see what she's doing. It's because that oxytocin, what we're craving is bonding. So we're tending to our children, we're bonding with our children, we're going, calling our friend, texting our friend, whatever it is, Snapchatting our friend, whatever medium you're going to do that on. But what that's doing is that's flooding your cells in oxytocin. And that for women, that's very calming. That's actually how we get into our parasympathetics. So, and in the book, I make this sort of joke that, the girls' night out is actually really important for your neurological well-being. Like it's always like, wine and women night. And maybe you nix the wine and you get together and have some tea, or you have a healthy meal together. But that connection and that community with women who you feel safe to be around and safe to be yourself with is actually incredibly healthy for bringing down your stress response. And of course, this very well, Doc, like when our cortisol response, like when we are now moving away from our sympathetics to our parasympathetics, that's when the weight comes off, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the classic overstressed type A woman is going to say, well, I feel tired and wired. Like I feel tired in the evening, but I can't seem to shut my mind off. I need coffee to keep me going. And the weight that I'm gaining is all through my belly. Like I'm getting this sort of like spare tire-esque, like through the lower abdomen area. And that's usually a sign that you are in a sympathetic dominant state. So we all start there. In the book, we sort of all start with like ways, like actionable items for you to start bringing down your stress levels. And we talk about all, a lot of the experts that I've interviewed on my podcast, Emily Fletcher being one of them, and other experts in terms of how we can actually get our brains online, like the higher centers of our brain, to start to bring down that stress response.
Yeah. And when we talk about metabolic flexibility and we talk about a body composition, we know that this intangible, because I call it the intangible, like we so rarely know when we're in that state.
Right.
Unless once upon a time you were like me and you were a stressaholic and you thought it was your slight edge. I used to
Right.
be like, let's bring on the epinephrine, let's bring on the cortisol because I'm
Yes.
about to kick everyone's butt. I
Right.
mean, it's just like that was my super booster until I completely crashed into the ground.
Right. Right. Right.
And so what we know too is when we're in that sympathetic state that we co-elevate other hormones. We cause
Mhm.
all kinds of chaos, but one of the
Right.
biggest hormones that we co-elevate is insulin. And
Yes.
so speak to me a little bit about clearly how critical it is to get ourselves out of this fight or flight state. And yes, there's so many wonderful techniques and strategies. I know that you're going to have them in the book as well. But how can we be even mindful about that with our insulin levels? Like, is there anything
Mm.
that you're recommending as well? Because that was, for so long, I understood the sympathetic nervous system and I got that I kept doing this, but I didn't realize I was stuck in this spiral of like
Right.
insulin crashes and that I would
Mhm.
want more snacks or
Mhm.
something, a little, just grow a little something to get a little bit more energy. I was like, where is
Little
my
hit.
energy?
Where's the hit? Give me the little
Give
hit.
me a
Yeah.
hit because I
Yeah.
got to
Yeah.
get through this next 3 hours,
Right.
until there's another 3 hours, how
Right.
women are. And
Mhm.
so speaking to me, because I think this is one of the most critical pieces when we talk about body composition and a lack of metabolic flexibility is that we're borrowing from somewhere and, ultimately we're not making it up over time.
Yeah, well said. So I would say with the cortisol, it's really important for us to understand that in that sympathetic state, one of the major players there is the hormone cortisol. And cortisol is what's classified as a counter-regulatory hormone. So when we think about what counter-regulatory means, is it is going to counter normal metabolisms or normal circadian rhythms, I should say.
Mhm.
So when you are presented with a threat, whether it is real or imagined, your stress response, including your cortisol, is going to increase. So what that's going to do is it's going to draw blood away from your center, so away from your digestion, away from your womb, away from your immune system, because if there's like a tiger, in front of you, we always talk about the stress response and we talk about like the proverbial tiger, right? So there's a tiger, you don't care about, the invading bacteria or the lunch that you ate or, reproduction at that point. You're just concerned about getting away. So what happens is the cortisol will throw most of your nervous attention into your musculoskeletal system. So it's going to throw blood into the muscles, into the periphery, because what we want is we want to get away. We either want to fight with our muscles, the tiger, or we want to run. So in both cases, we need blood and we need nutrients to be going into the muscles. So what cortisol does in terms of, as you were saying, in terms of a metabolic influence of cortisol, is it keeps insulin around. So normally they oppose each other, right? So normally cortisol is going to keep the blood sugar high.
It's a
Uh,
regulator. Yeah.
yes, exactly. It's a regulator. So it'll try to keep the blood sugar high so that it can throw that sugar into the muscles. But over time, when that becomes a chronic problem, now insulin can't sort of watch this, drama play out and not do anything about it. So we'll see insulin beginning to rise as well. So initially in the acute response, cortisol and insulin sort of oppose each other. So cortisol will try to keep the blood sugar and the blood glucose around. But when this is a chronic problem, then we see cortisol and insulin sort of rising together like sisters. So we see cortisol up, and then because we have elevated blood sugar for a long period of time, then insulin has to do something with it. So it
Yes.
will raise. The job of insulin, of course, is to bring the glucose and put it into any cell. So whether that is a muscle cell, it is a fat cell, it is a liver cell, it is going to put it somewhere.
Mhm.
And when your insulin is chronically elevated, you are always going to be using glucose as the substrate or as the precursor for energy. And you will never get into a more fat burning state where you are going into the fat stores, opening up the fat stores and actually breaking down the fat for use. Because fat, or adipose tissue is the proper word for it, is actually just stored energy, right?
Mhm.
So the excess pizzas and the burgers and all the things that we've eaten over the course of time that we didn't actually need, your body body is a bit of a hoarder in that she will say, oh, extra energy, I'll just keep this around for a rainy day. So she will turn that extra food into adipose tissue. And for someone who's looking to improve their metabolism, or maybe they're looking for fat loss, or maybe they're looking to improve their body composition, or maybe to improve that excess weight that they're seeing creep up around the tummy over time, we want to be able to be flexible, to be metabolically flexible. And that means your ability to use glucose or carbohydrates or proteins as your substrate for energy. But also we want to be able to use fat, our adipose tissue, as a substrate for energy. Because when we break down our fat cells, so the triglycerides are like the storage form of fat. So triglycerides will break down into fatty acids and a glycerin backbone, which will go through a process called gluconeogenesis, and then it turns into glucose. But now we have energy that can serve most of the body. And then the fatty acids will go through a second pass through the liver, and they'll be turned into something called ketone bodies. So most everyone listening here has heard of keto at this point, or the ketogenic diet, but the name of that diet comes from your ability to produce ketone bodies. And as a woman, this is really important for us to be metabolically flexible, to be able to use both glucose, which is important, and insulin is also important. It's not the devil, but it's, there are some really good uses for insulin, like here it helps with conversion of, T4 to T3, and it's a growth factor. But when we abuse it, when insulin's always high, this is when we really run into trouble. So we want to be able to use glucose, and we want to be able to use insulin in the way that it was originally designed. And then we also want to have the flexibility to tap into our fat stores when we want. And in order to do that, we work through this in detail in the book, but in order to do that, we want to be restricting the things that cause an elevation in insulin. One is your stress, right? So getting a hold on your stress. And the other, when we think about this from a nutrient perspective, is going to be our carbohydrates, and eating a carbohydrate appropriate diet for both your lifestyle in terms of how you spend most of your day, if it's in front of a desk or you're sedentary, and if you're working out, if you're someone who is interested in weight training and building lean muscle mass, there's also a time and place for insulin. So we play around with the timing of insulin, or how we can, get a little boost of insulin when we're trying to grow muscles as well.
I love it. Okay, so let's say, taking all of that information, let's say I'm hearing you, I'm listening to you, and let's say that, Stephanie, I know I'm still struggling with stress, girl. Okay.
Yeah.
I got a lot of obligations, a lot of things going on. There's things I just can't remove off my plate. I'm working on a couple of the self-care pieces, but I probably know that I'm not going to be able to get a handle on all of it. On the other side, I am definitely concerned about my lack of metabolic flexibility, right? I recognize that this intangible over here, this fight or flight or perceived stress, me running off late to meetings, or I got someone blowing me up on my text message, or, my mother needs something, my daughter needs something, everybody needs something from me all the time. That's always happening. I don't know how to turn all that off, but I also want to work with what I got.
Yes.
I find that there's so many women in that place where, like, okay, as much as I'd love to be a Zen yoga master over here, it is.
It's like, I got 3 kids. They're fighting right now. I got to get dinner on the table. I get it.
Exactly.
Yeah. I totally get it. Yeah.
But I also want to know how I can work with what I got, with where I'm at, despite that, and specifically around nutrition, specifically around my cycle, really understanding that, I'm doing a little bit of training, love to optimize that as well. But let's spend some time on food, because I think food really, really moves the needle. And I feel like a lot of us, although you and I love to work out, not everyone does, girl. You know what I'm saying? And so not everyone does. That's been my experience.
But food is accessible. We all need food.
And we
all
can
got to
all
eat.
make little changes that can swing the big door open. So how can we shift the way that we eat, what we're eating, how we're eating it, to help regain that metabolic flexibility, that we're not carrying all that belly fat, that we're not seeing the scale just move in the wrong direction of where we're trying to go? What do we do?
I would say the first step is to forgive yourself for not being able to be a Zen master, and that's okay, right? I think as the type A personality, or the recovering type A personality
Type
that
A
I
Virgo
have.
over here.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's like, okay, God, like, why can't I do it all and be the things? So, giving yourself, the first thing is, like, you're not going to be perfect. You're perfectly imperfect, right? So maybe you don't get the kids, like maybe they, my kids, like they like their hair long. I try to cut their hair and they're like, get away. Like it's not going to be perfect. It's perfectly imperfect. But you're right. One of the biggest, movers of the needle is going to be what you put in your body, because what you put in your body is going to make up the structure of your cells. It's going to build muscle. It's going to help or detract from having a healthy, healthy bones, healthy skin, healthy brain, all the things. So in terms of how I like to structure this for people, the very basics is to move away from what, would be classified and has been called the standard American diet. SAD is the acronym for short, SAD, because it really is. It really
It's
is
pretty
sad.
sad.
It's very, very processed, lots of trans fats, lots of inflammatory vegetable oils, all the things that cause
Sugar.
rampant sugar, right? And truthfully, even people that think that they're doing keto or think that they're doing paleo and they're having paleo cookies and paleo protein bars and keto protein bars and or keto fat bars or whatever, if that's the primary constituents in your diet, you're still eating the standard American diet because it's not real foods. So the very first thing is, can we look at your pantry and can we clean it out? So can we now stock your fridge with fresh vegetables and fruit? Not fruit and vegetables, because everyone talks about it, fruit and vegetables, but vegetables and fruit. Fruit, at the end of the day, phytonutrients, all the things. However, lots of sugar.
It's still sugar, girl.
It's still, you
It's
have
still
a bowl of
fructose.
apples. It's like, it's still fructose.
And your
Exactly
liver,
right.
can we talk about your liver having to break this down first
Yeah.
before it even gets into the bloodstream? And so, I just want to speak into, and not, I love, and right now being pregnant, I'm not gonna lie, I love me some from berries,
Mm-hmm.
but
You're also growing another human. Like you get a free pass
he
there,
loves berries too. And
Yes.
so I am eating berries. Yeah, I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's fructose. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And I don't mind being the bearer of bad news on that.
Yeah, no, and I just think that when we think about fruits and vegetables, when we think about the Health Canada or the USDA, like in terms of the recommendations that they make, it's often, well, like 9 servings of fruits and vegetables. So if you eat like a bowl of apples, you're like, hey, I ticked off that box. And it's like, no, you didn't. You got
No.
to have the veg. Like the veg comes first.
You're going to look like an apple if you keep eating 9
Exactly right.
apples a
That's exactly
day.
right. Exactly right. So think about when you're thinking about building your plate, I like to think about when you're looking at your plate, if you were to sort of look at a bird's eye view looking down on your plate, the majority of the plate should be green. So that could be spinach, it can be lettuce, it can be arugula or rocket for the Europeans that are listening in. They call it rocket. I
I
didn't know
know,
that.
girl.
Yeah, they call it rocket. We have all the brassica family, right? Like the cauliflowers and the broccolis and the Brussels sprouts and all those really like the cruciferous vegetable group, bok
Mhm.
choy and all those things. So all that should be making up the base of your plate. Your protein, if it is animal protein, which is something that I am a supporter of, we want to try to be having as much as we can grass-fed animals, because when we think about vegans and like some of the big argument that they have, and they're right, is that the way that most animals live and die is inhumane, right? Like when we think about conventionally raised farm animals, they never see the light of day. They're put in these really close quarters. And then the way that they're killed is also really terrible. And when you think about when the animal knows that they're going to die, they also have cortisol going through into their muscles, which you end up eating. So, as much as you can, organic meats. And if, that's not available to everyone, I understand that. Like when we think about our budget, if you can put as much as you can towards purchasing organic meats and poultry, wild caught fish. Dr. Bredesen talks about the smash fish, right? So sardines, mackerel, anchovies, and then herring.
Salmon, maybe?
Salmon, yeah, salmon, yeah. So if we think about the
Yes.
smash fish, wild caught, always better than conventionally farmed fish. So thinking about protein as about the size of your palm, and then fat as the fill. So that could be, an extra virgin olive oil, it could be avocado oil, macadamia nut oil, like whatever oil you are using. Because when we think about sort of the macronutrient breakdown of that, fat is very dense in terms of its calories. So you don't actually need a lot to get to a ketogenic state. Like if we're thinking about starting on a keto diet, we want to be thinking about most of it coming from fat. But even before we get to keto, just building out the plate as like green on the bottom, the meat is about the size of your palm, and then fat kind of fills you up to the top there. So that's like step one, is moving away from the standard American diet. The second part is more of a female focused ketogenic diet. And this is what is going to build out or to actually get the inherent pathways that you already have working. So we actually, all women are born with the capacity to burn sugar for fuel and the capacity to burn fat for fuel. The problem is we never access that pathway. So, it's like kind of like the use it or
The
lose
fat
it thing, right?
pathway. We
The
haven't.
fat pathway.
Yes.
Yes. So using fat as an energetic source is we don't often, unless we're thinking about it consciously and looking at our meal, we're usually in a glycolytic state or using
Mhm.
sugar as our precursor. So the next step would be to move into more of a plant heavy, not based, but plant heavy ketogenic diet. Lots of green leafy vegetables, as we've been talking about. Meats, if you're a meat eater, you can do it vegetarian as well. So it can be done with eggs and it can be done
Organic
lacto ovo.
tofu or
Yeah,
tempeh or something like
you
that.
got it. Yeah, you got it. So we move into this metabolic flexibility. And for most women, I would recommend a minimum of 28 days or about one cycle of your period to go through that. Now, many women in my experience, and I've had thousands of women go through this program at this point. So many women need more than that. So if you've been someone who's only ever been sort of in the sugar burning
Hmm.
state, it takes a little bit longer and you got to love and forgive your body for this. Like give her the runway to step into who you want her to be. Repeat that cycle one, maybe two times. And by the sort of second repetition, most people are like, yep, I got it. I know I'm fat adapted. I can go for 5 hours and I don't need to eat. And you had mentioned something really important, which I just wanted to highlight. You said, most women are like, I just got to get through like the next 2 hours. So I just need 3 hours and I just need a little hit. When you are
That's
fat
sugar,
adapted,
girl. Yeah.
it's sugar. It's exactly right. So when you are someone who's fat adapted, you can actually go for 5 or 6 hours without needing food.
And
So
even
this
longer, depending.
depending, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say on average, like for me, I can go like 5 or 6 hours and I'm not really thinking about food. And then, I'm like, okay, it's time for me to eat now. And my body will tell me. And so I intuitively can I've learned the language of my body, so to speak. So how long I can go between meals, I'm not having really sugary because what happens in that 3 hour, like I just need a little bit to get me through this next couple meetings or whatever, is you get the sugar hit, your insulin goes through the roof, right? And then she crashes, right? And then you have this, like now you're coming back to the kitchen or you're going back to the snack bar for the next sugar hit. So that's also a really important when we're thinking about brain health and body composition, and the two are very much related to each other. When we're thinking about tapping into our fat stores, that's going to give you nice, clean, sustained energy throughout the day.
Hmm.
So that's sort of phase two. And then just to finish it up, phase three is then once you've sort of lost the weight, if that's your goal, or you've regained, that metabolic flexibility and you're fat adapted, then we start to bring you into eating in tune with your menstrual cycle if you're in your reproductive years. And if you're menopausal, then there's a certain rhythm and cadence that we take you through in the book as well.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So that first step really is to get us into the state that many of us have never gotten into, which is moving us more into a fat burning state where
Correct.
we're leveraging a lot of that fuel that we haven't taken advantage of very often, opposed to
Yes.
needing to eat consistently and more carbohydrate based or sugar based little snacks to kind of get us through the day.
Unlike many people in sort of the online space or in the thought leader space, I don't actually think women should be in ketosis forever. I think we need to
Yeah.
sort of we need to get the wheels, the cogs turning, and then we can move in and out as we please. So I actually like it for a short nutritional therapeutic window. And then we move into sort of menstrual and then eating alongside your menstrual cycle.
Absolutely. Well, what I love about the protein, fat, and focusing on the fiber, the PFF, is one, all of that is very anti-inflammatory.
Yes.
And it also helps to reset insulin levels. I mean, there's so many side benefits. It helps to reset the gut microbiome. I mean, there's a lot of really big benefits. And I, as well, have seen that I have a shorter program. I put women through a 14-day and notice that most of them need at least 30. But in
Yes.
those 14 days, they start to see a shift and they start to say, oh my gosh, wait, what's going on? Something's
It's like
working
I
here.
have energy. I don't get it.
What is going on? But
Yeah.
I'm not fully there yet. And so I'm
Yeah.
like, we'll just keep on going. But you're absolutely right. I think even longer than that at times, because we're doing so much cleanup and we're doing so much hormone re-regulating to get our body into that state. And I also agree that we shouldn't stay in keto forever. There should be, again, it's a flexibility based on our cycles.
Yes.
We're not men. Men can stay in keto longer than we can, believe based on the research that I've read. But for women, because there's a lot of energy, especially around our cycle, and especially the ebbs and flow of our cycle and our hormones, they're definitely, like you said, and that's what this whole book is about too, is really showing how we can leverage our cycle and to match it up with our nutritional profile.
Yes. And another big tenet I think that's important for every woman, no matter what your health goals are, is to learn how to respond to your body when she's talking to you. I think so many of us, the type A personalities, I'm kind of highlighting you here, we live in our heads, right? It's scary. Like we don't want to feel our feelings. We want to punch things out. We want to get the to-do list done. Da, 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 da. And as a result, we actually forget how to care for ourselves as women. And we forget in this more male dominated world that we actually are more, sometimes we're softer, sometimes we need to slow down, and sometimes there's a time to quicken the pace. So when you sort of learn the ebbs and flows of your hormonal milieu, and we actually go through an exercise in the book where we get you to start tracking your cycle and we kind of break it down week by week so you understand what to expect, what's going to happen, and, dotting your I's and crossing your T's to make sure that your blood flow is regular, that your testosterone levels are what they should be, that the luteal phase is doing what it should be. So, once you sort of understand your natural rhythm, and even though, my cycle is like 29 days on the money, like every single month, 29 days on the, but, yours might be 27. Someone listening here might be 32. You just have to learn how long you stay in each phase of your menstrual cycle if you're still in your reproductive age, and then adapt to it. Right. And that's the hallmark, when we talk about your mom, that's the hallmark of a sexy, empowered woman, is because she knows herself. And one of the, rites of passage, if you will, as a woman, is to understand how you are uniquely different, not only just from men, but from other women, right? Because we're going to come to the table with different traumas, different big T, little t traumas, different environment, different upbringings. And while we all have kind of the same pieces, and same parts, we're going to operate slightly differently. And there's a nuance between each and every one of us. So we're like snowflakes, we're all kind of unique.
I love it. Two things I walked away from that I kind of want to revisit is one, absolutely right. Knowing our body, like in our own individual body, it's about taking ownership. And the thing about women is what I've learned is that we are so great at taking ownership of everything. There had been a time where we'd been brought up with thinking that maybe doctors and practitioners should know more about our bodies than we do, definitely with women in the
Yes.
society that we've created. And I
Yes.
think it's becoming a time where we really decide that no one knows my body better than me. And if I want to see the changes and I want to be an active participant, I've got to know my body and be able to adapt based on what my body is doing. And that is huge. And I know that's such a big part of this book. And I think a big part of the overall arcing message that we're having today is that it's a level of ownership. No doctor is going to put you on the plan to get it right, because let me ask you, has a doctor ever? Has a standard medical doctor ever done it? I'm going to have to say probably no.
Mhm.
This isn't what they're looking at, working with your biochemistry and from a root cause approach to actually dial you in your metabolism. Now, the second thing I loved was all of the conversation around intuitive eating, intuitive knowing. Now, when I find that we're in sugar burning state, type A, sugar burner, sympathetic nervous system, girl, I feel like the intuitive is like a little mini
It's
voice.
like a whisper
It's a whisper. You cannot hear it.
at the back of the room. Yeah.
It's like, you shut up over there. Like, and what you hear is you hear the hangry voice. You
Yeah.
hear the cravings voice. You hear the blood sugar just tanked voice. So I find that when we're in a sugar burning state and we're constantly on the go, we have a really difficult time tuning into that intuitive. Like I find it very challenging for women to know how to intuitively eat until we do the reset.
Right.
And then they can. Like, can you remember a time where you did not know what your body was intuitively
A
telling you, girl?
100%. Yes. Yes. It's like most of my adult life.
Yeah, exactly. And so how good does it feel to like really know your body and to have that intuitive piece? Can we speak into that? So I'm going to put my little type A, I got the kids over here again.
Yeah.
I'm trying to work it out over there, do what I can with what I got. I want to be at a place where I'm intuitively eating, where I'm intuitively listening to my body. I'm doing the 30-day reset. I'm going to get that locked and loaded. I've never listened to that level of intuition potentially. Although I
Mhm.
think, we as women, probably one of our greatest sources of power is our intuition.
Totally. Totally. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how I can be more mindful in that department.
So the first thing is never start off trying to be mindful when you're hangry.
True that, girl.
So if you are there,
I'm just trying to make sure I don't kill people.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
all I'm trying to do.
It's like step back. Yeah,
Get away
about
from
to
me.
explode. So the first thing for me, at least in my transformation, I can speak to this, and this is what women have also relayed to me, is there's this realization that happens when we are wanting to level up, whether it's a metabolism, whether it's like trying to get a handle on the chronic stress, whatever it is, that our thoughts are not us. They are not ours. They are just thoughts. So when we can, just unhitch, sometimes, you have you're in that glycolytic state, you're hangry, the kids are screaming, you got to get dinner on. That's not going to be the best time to take a breath and be like, listen, like this has to be an ongoing, dedication or practice for you in the times that are very calm and very manageable so that you can build up that resilient muscle, if you will, your brain muscle, if you will, in those calmer times. And then as you get stronger, you lift heavier weights. You try it in situations that maybe have a little bit more of an emotional charge or a little bit more frenetic for you. And when you realize that your thoughts are there, I mean, there's sort of always sort of two voices, right? Like if you ever watch like the Bugs Bunny cartoons, and I'm totally aging myself here, but it used to be like the devil on the one hand telling Bugs Bunny, do this bad thing, and then the angel on the other hand. You also have those sort of opposing voices in your head. And I like to call her like the inner critic. I name mine, I call mine Baby Steffi, because Baby Steffi's like, her big triggers are she's scared, she's afraid of being abandoned, and she wants to feel safe. So whenever she doesn't feel those things, it's like, oh, my husband is not interested in me anymore. Oh, he's getting bored of me. Oh, I must be putting on weight. I got to, there's this like sort of frenetic thinking that happens. And when you are thinking like that, if you find yourself saying like, oh my God, like I can't handle this, the kids are driving me crazy, my husband doesn't lift a finger, and all these different things, know that that's coming from a place in your brain that is sympathetic. Know that that is coming from your limbic system, which is designed for you to just survive, to just get through the next couple of moments. But when you can just put a little bit of distance between yourself and that thought and know, like, that's actually not my thought, it's just a thought that's
It's just
happening.
rapid survival thoughts. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just like a rapid survival thought. I love that. That's a great description of it. And you can say, okay, what's actually really happening here? Like I was sharing this to a friend the other day. And this is maybe a silly example, but it'll highlight the point, like how quick your inner critic will kind of pop up. I came down one morning, my partner, Giovanni, wakes up, 5 a.m. He does a lot of thinking, like deep thinking work. And it was like a Wednesday. He was giving a big event, like he was, doing an online event on the Friday. I came down, I was like, I'm going to wear like little shorts and I'm going to get some compliments from my husband. So I come downstairs in my little shorts and I was like, good morning, like just waiting for him to be like, wow, you look so great. And he looked at me and like in his like kind of zone and he was like, oh, good morning. And like kind of went back to his work. And like my brain was like, oh my God, he totally didn't, does he not see how short these are? Like, these are short shorts. Like, he didn't
Did he
compliment me.
not see my butt?
Yeah. Does he
How
not see my
how
butt?
could he? That's the only thing he saw. How
I
could
was
he?
like,
Whatever
well,
thought it was, squirrel, butt.
exactly. So it's like, well, I guess he doesn't love me anymore. That's what was in my head. I'm like, well, I guess he lost interest. So I was like, okay. So I caught myself in that moment. Thankfully, I was like, okay, had my coffee, went down, did my yoga, did my thing, got into my frontal lobe, and I came back. And so several hours later, I went to him and I was like, hey, honey, this morning when I came down, I was in the shorts and, like, did you notice? And he was like, oh yeah, honey, like you looked so good. Like, I just want to tell you, like, you look so great in the shorts. And I was like, you know what? I love if you compliment me, like that makes me feel really good. But so I kind of had an adult way of dealing with it, but inside my head, like the initial, like primitive, like, oh, I guess he doesn't love me anymore. Didn't like me in the shorts. So that happens like and I share this kind of silly story to highlight that we all have these triggers, and we will have these automatic thoughts, Daniel Amen calls them automatic negative thoughts. and they happen involuntarily. You cannot stop them from happening. So just like you got to make friends with them and you got to understand when she's talking. So for me, I was like, oh, there's baby Steffi. She's afraid of abandonment. She's afraid like, oh, he didn't compliment her on her shorts. He's going to leave her. She's going to be alone, just her and her shorts in some sad little, sad state. So for the woman who is chronically stressed, is like balancing 1,000 things and is like, I just want to make this happen. You have to just slow it down and understand that those thoughts are not yours. They've been implanted in you from, I call them the Fab Four: mothers, fathers, teachers, preachers, right? Like your upbringing, your mother's voice and her own belief system, your father's voice, his own belief system, leaders in your community, teachers that told you can't, you shouldn't, you must not, you cannot, whatever. So just know that you'll always have that voice. And then you also get to choose. You also get to choose your thinking as well. You get to choose better thoughts and better. And, when you are able to choose better thoughts, you have better behaviors as well.
I love that. I love that so much. It's so funny. It's such a contrast to my morning, just that little shorts. I'm trying to get dressed for this interview and I'm so grateful this pregnancy and everything, but it does feel like I'm wearing a pregnancy bodysuit. Like
Yes.
it just,
Yeah.
I mean, I've got stretch marks on my boobs now, girl. Like I was like, what happened? So I'm
Yeah.
changing and it's an awkward experience trying to get, and I can hear my husband, I can hear Alex come in. And I'm like, oh goodness, I just got little panties on and everything else is just hanging out. And I can't move fast enough.
Don't come in.
And his eyes were like, whoa.
Yeah.
And he just starts coming towards me.
That's so funny. But that's so funny because like you think like it's interesting as a pregnant woman, you're like, oh God, I must look terrible. But like when your husband looks at you, it's like, I planted that seed in there. I did that. I
He's
love
like,
it.
I
Like
did
guys
it.
love that. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love it's I'm like, you're taking all the credit. And it makes me laugh because I think a lot of people don't know how much, because I just want to just aside, this is way crazy side note real quick, because so many men are like, I did that. And I was like, actually, the woman's reproductive system, you have aimless wanderers that you put into the body. And honestly, they don't know where they're at. They don't
Right.
know what's going on. I said the only way that you even got to that egg is that my body literally handheld you to the egg.
Oh
Like
yeah. Oh
you
yeah.
guide them there. And then the egg selects.
And then it's so funny because the egg sends out a signal like I'm ready. And then she chooses who penetrate, like which one comes in. And then if one comes in and there's DNA damage or something, then like
She's
the
like,
egg will
nah.
repair it. And then she packs a lunch, like she packs food for her and the sperm as they travel down to, implant themselves. So it is the egg, it is the woman.
It is.
Yes.
It's our fallopian tube. It's our
Yes.
uterus. We're
Yes.
literally guiding the aimless wanderers who have no idea where they're going to the egg. So I just want to speak to that, and not to say that men still can't lay their claim, whatever they want to do. I just want to speak into always in awe of the wisdom of a woman's body,
Yeah, man.
including like, let me help you get me pregnant.
Yes. 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 Well, it's so true, right? Like it's what we were saying, like the egg kind of, and I was talking about this with Kate Northrup, and she was talking about her mother, Dr. Christiane Northrup, who I think is going to be on your summit, on your hormone summit. And she was talking about this idea of egg wisdom and how as women, we can start behaving more like our eggs. Like the egg doesn't like run up and down the fallopian tube, like looking for the guy. And did he text me? Like, no, she's like, I'm here. You can come to me. The smart ones are going
I'm
to
the
find
queen.
me. I'm the queen. I'm going to sit at the top here, right if you can find me, then so she sits there, then they all kind of like scramble, the aimless wanderers, as you said, a couple of them find her and she's like, okay, I'm going to choose from the people that, the sperm around. I get to choose who comes in here and, chooses one. If one comes in and there's like the egg will repair the DNA damage in the sperm. And, to credit Kate Northrup appropriately, she's like, and she packs a lunch. So she has enough food for her and the sperm to make their several day journey down to the uterus. And then they implant and then, the cell starts dividing and then you have a baby 9 months later. But to go from 2 cells to like 2 trillion in 9 months, like that is a woman-led process.
I just wanted to speak into that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to speak into, yes, absolutely having kind of the fear voice that you are not your thoughts and how those can kind of play out. But I thought it was so funny, the contrast of, I'm running around the house trying to escape my husband half the time. I'm just always like, uh-oh, here he comes, which I love. I love that he just cannot, no matter where I'm at, no matter how tore up from the floor up I look, girl, he doesn't matter if he's in what state of thought he is in, his mind just goes
Oh,
right
and I have very rarely seen a man look at you like the way your husband looks at you is something to treasure.
yeah.
He has it so bad. He's been bit so bad by the love bug with you.
I love this interview so much. Okay, so we have definitely navigated some of the biggest concerns around hormonal imbalance, especially around the stress response system. We've talked about how we can, that first step to resetting our metabolism, getting that metabolic resilience, making us more metabolically flexible, whether we are going into sugar burning mode or fat burning mode, and then what it can look like to listen to that deeper wisdom driven intuition and how that can begin to become our guiding light. And I know that there's so much more to be had in this book, and and all the other different hormonal imbalances and how they interplay. It's all going to be in there as well, which I'm
Yes.
super excited about. Now, where can we get the book? How do we get our hands on this? Where do you want us to go for this book?
Well, you can go to thebettybodybook.com. You can
Perfect.
buy it on Amazon. It's sort of all on online retailers. It's going to be, far and wide there. And I will also give your listeners a little gift here. So if you guys want to download, I prepared a little meal plan
Yay.
for you. So it's like a 4-week meal plan in terms of how you can cycle, how you can eat based on your menstrual cycle. And I'll give that to you as a link, and you can put that in your show notes as a gift from me to you and for your listeners as well.
That is perfect. So I know we didn't get into the nuts and bolts of all of that today. And I want women to know that we can eat intuitively for our cycle. And that's literally, you're going to get the how to done for you plan and strategy
Yes.
in this guide. So that way, if you're like, wait, I wanted more of that. I did have Dr. Stephanie on in 2020, and we did a whole episode on that, and we really detailed it out. And then you've got the guide as well, the how-to guide. So we got you covered no matter what. I'll have both of those things in the show notes. I'll have the last episode that we did together, just in case you guys want to hear that conversation in great detail. And then I'll also have the guide for you to get. But at the end of the day, get that book. That's what it really comes down to. So we'll have all of those in the notes for this episode. Thank you so much for coming on and gracing us with your wisdom and your brilliance once again. I love you so much, girl, and I'm so, so happy for you.
I love you too. And thank you so much for saying that. And it's been just such a lovely time to spend time with you. And like you and I have so similar in our philosophies and our approach to women's health and hormone care. So it's always great to spend time with you.
All right, honey. See you soon.